It's been called the sport of kings. And for more than 50 years, the Hayes family have been its consummate champions.
We've won most of the majors: Melbourne Cup, Caulfield Cup, Cox Plate, Golden Slippers, Blue Diamonds, Futurities, Australian Cups, to name a few. It's been a lovely ride for the family.
When a Hayes horse triumphs, it's a combination of pedigree and training. And it's the same with the family.
Every father would probably want a son that's a carbon copy, sort of absolute clone of them, you know, especially if you're Colin Hayes. I mean, why wouldn't you want a son who was very similar to yourself?
Colin Hayes, the legendary trainer, built an empire in these green hills. But of his two sons, one would disappoint, whilst the other would follow his father and inherit the Hayes kingdom. This is Lindsay Park, in the heart of the Barossa Valley. It's home to the Hayes family's multi-million-dollar business of breeding and training thoroughbreds in the art of winning. And on this winter morning, like any other, Lindsay Park's owner, David Hayes, is studying the form.
Not a bad first gallop, though, was it?
Oh, you gonna look like Craig that time?
Yeah, better.
As one of the country's top trainers, David is preparing for the next racing season. He commands the finest experts and facilities money can buy. This was all created by his late father, Colin Hayes. But the family hasn't always operated in such luxury.
In the old days, we used to sit over in that little tractor chair over there in the cold, and Dad used to sat there for years watching track work. But luckily for us, he started getting angina, and we had to get into the warm huts, so all these huts were developed and put around the place with heaters, so we've had the benefit of those.
It was either angina or piles. We weren't sure, was it?
You would get a very cold bum on that team, I can tell you.
David's father, Colin, was no stranger to hardship. He grew up in a non-racing family of tradesmen in the working-class suburb of Port Adelaide.
His father, Benjamin, was an engineer, and he died of a heart attack at a very early age of 43. And so his mother, Olive, raised 6 children during the Depression years.
As Olive's youngest son, Colin would inherit his father's weak heart. But from a young age, he showed an unexpected talent, an affinity with horses.
When he was very young, he would go and catch horses for the local blacksmith. I think most people today would have heard of the horse whisperer. You know, they know how to read horses and read horses in the paddock, and that was Dad's gift.
Without a father to support the family, Colin left school at 13 and trained as a boilermaker. But his ambition lay elsewhere.
He would ride before work to the local Matson family stables and help out with any odd jobs. He had boundless energy.
In the sunny days of post-war Australia, Colin also found time to court a pretty young woman, Betty Munro.
They met at the Semaphore at a dance. They were wonderful dancers. Mum and Dad, absolutely, they should have been on Dancing with the Stars. They were brilliant.
I always remember I was called Betty the best horse in the stable, to which she replied, no, I'm the best filly. And certainly she was. She was the backbone of whose success. No praise would be too great to lavish on her.
While still courting Betty, Colin scraped together enough to buy his first horse, Surefoot, an inspired purchase that would prove his eye for spotting winners.
Dad didn't know its pedigree. He instinctively knew that Surefoot could run.
Colin rode Surefoot in its first race, and on the eve of his honeymoon, he took a big gamble.
It was the ride of his life because he'd actually put his honeymoon money on Surefoot and it was paying 66 to 1.
They lined up at the 1850 start at Cheltenham and the horse missed the start and he got knocked down and put right out of the race. And I think he looked up after 200 metres and thought, shit. And he worked out that he had to pass, I think, 8 or 9 horses to get third, which was to save the bet.
He put all his energy into the race. He rode home for his life, just thinking, the honeymoon money, the honeymoon money. And so he was absolutely delighted and relieved to finish third. Just third.
So Betty got her honeymoon, and Colin got his chance for a new life.
He said to Betty, if I don't succeed with this, well, I'll go back to my trade. Well, we all know the answer to that.
Surefoot went on to win more than £15,000. With the prize money, Colin built his first stables beside the beach in the Adelaide suburb of Semaphore. He'd chosen a perfect location for training winners. From now on, nothing would be left to chance.
They'd trot the horses along the beach for miles and then they'd rush them in the water, which is riding them bareback and just rushing them along in the water. And they built up their muscles and Dad had great success at Semaphore as a trainer.
Within 5 years, Colin won his first Adelaide Premiership and attracted the attention of the racing fraternity, including a young bloodstock agent, David Coles.
He just had something that I hadn't seen in many people. Just something about this man that inspired me. And I thought if he succeeds, well, I got a chance of succeeding.
As Colin's career took off, he and his wife Betty made the stables their home. And 3 children soon followed, Peter, Kerry and Jan. Racing was the focus of Colin's life, and he assumed his children would share his obsession, especially his eldest child, Peter. Yet this son would never emulate the sire.
He was quite a shy child. He would hide under the table when we'd sing Happy Birthday. And he certainly wasn't an outgoing person.
His best thing was to go to the Semaphore bike shop and just stand there for hours and look at the accessories and the puncture kits and things like that. And I was absolutely bored silly as a child, but a very good sister and used to go along with him and do all those sorts of things.
Concerned about Peter's focus, Colin began to pin his hopes for the future on a 4th unborn child.
When travelling overseas with Colin, I think it was in 1962, Betty was having another baby. He kept telling me, and I got quite sick of it in the end. He said he would be having a son, the son would be a great athlete, and what was more important to him would succeed him as one of the great trainers of the country. I got quite sick of it because it was like a record. He kept on playing it and he was firmly convinced.
Colin got the boy he'd predicted. This new son, David, had all the traits of his father.
Dad always wanted a brown-eyed boy, and he got it with David. David was joined at the hip to Dad. They're inseparable, absolutely inseparable.
As a very young boy, I used to go to the races with Dad and mark off the races, check if a horse needs blinkers or help around the stable with Dad, do little jobs for Dad.
I think Colin started training David from when he could crawl, really. Colin was a great planner, achiever, great planning ahead was his main game.
With the trophies mounting and 2 sons in the wings, all was going to schedule. Colin now wanted to expand his budding empire.
He'd been to England and Newmarket, where they train horses in a country environment away from the city. Dad walked away from them and thought, God, I've got to build one of those in Australia.
In 1965, Colin Hayes found the place to realise his vision. The boy from Port Adelaide became the squire of Lindsay Park, an estate steeped in the history of South Australia. Here he transformed the landscape of Australian racing.
First of all, he had to remove a hill to put in the racing track. And when one goes across to the racing track and has a look at what was achieved, it was really quite an engineering performance.
Colin had the foresight, I guess, to really think, what would I want if I was a horse? You know, your equine swimming pools, and it's like Disneyland for horses here. The tracks and the stables, they're all open, and horses are herd animals. They love to see each other. He took all of that into consideration.
Colin believed that in a good home, a horse could be taught to think positively and to win. And he also applied this strategy to his family.
He had expectations for his sons, as any father would, I think. He'd always want everybody to work in together. I mean, that's an ideal that probably every family business would have, is that you would have, you know, people that would really want to be there, would really want to follow your vision. I think that's high expectations because everybody's different.
Especially Colin's eldest son, Peter.
Peter was a very easygoing person. Peter was not a person who worried about or cared a lot about what people thought of him.
He would have been a sensational adventurer. If his father was Peter Brock, I think he would have been the heir apparent. You know, he loved driving fast cars and he loved mechanics and things like that.
But for now, Peter conformed to his father's wishes and worked alongside him at Lindsay Park.
Peter Hayes had this nature where he's considerate, whether it be horse or human. The fact that he was more patient than his father would take perhaps 3 months or more to have a horse to its absolute fitness, where his father probably would do it in a shorter time.
The gentle young trainer won the heart of the resident vet's daughter, Trish Thornbury. And in 1971, they were married.
We had the reception on the lawn at Lindsay Park. David at that stage was probably only about 9, 10 years old, yes. Yeah, he was the ring bearer. It's a beautiful February day. We coincided with the yearling sales, as you do when you're in the business.
I'm down the stairs now.
The young couple moved onto the property and started a family. Eldest son Sam was born in 1975.
There he is, whoa now, stop there. There he is, Sam Hayes. Pride and joy of the Hayes family.
Growing up at Lindsay Park was a great experience. Having all that wide open spaces, and I had cousins the same age as me, and I had a great time playing around Gran and Pa's place.
Sam is the eldest grandson, so, you know, you always have a special bond with your eldest grandson. You see the sort of dynasty continuing. Sam spent time with his grandfather, but Colin was a very, very busy man. His work came first.
And by now, Colin's achievements were even attracting royal acclaim.
The Queen visited and for afternoon tea and a look at the stallions. And Dad and the Queen spoke the same language. They shared the same genuine love of horses.
Younger son David took pride of place by his father's side.
My job was to open the door. And had numerous rehearsals, and I still think I mucked it up. But It was a huge occasion for Dad and Mum and Dad.
By the 1970s, Colin Hayes was a dominant figure in Australian racing, with his empire spreading across the country. Yet Colin, the expert at dictating his own destiny, found he couldn't mould his eldest son.
Basically, if Dad thought black, Peter thought white. They were totally different trainers. To train horses at Lindsay Park at the top level, Dad felt and believed that it was your life. And you had to treat it like it was your life, and that was probably one of the fundamental differences between the two of them. And because of those differences, they clashed.
Dad was different from David and Colin in that he had other interests too. Dad loved riding his push bike, he loved flying planes, he loved on a Sunday just to be doing other things perhaps than watching races or, you know, studying the form.
He was never going to be a sort of an empire builder, Peter. It wasn't his nature.
So in 1984, Peter made the critical decision to leave Lindsay Park.
Colin was disappointed, very disappointed that Peter wanted to go. Then, once Colin realised that Peter was quite determined that he would go, he came around and wished him the best of luck.
Peter was a reluctant horse trainer. You know, he did it because he was Colin Hayes' son, I think, not because he really loved it. And that's why he got out of the big picture of Lindsay Park.
He established his own modest training business in the Adelaide Hills, leaving the much younger David to work alone with his father.
Colin was lucky he had backup with David, and David was keen.
I was totally dedicated and caught up very quickly because I really wanted to do it. I could think of nothing more I wanted to do.
For David, it was like Christmas. David was a young man and all of a sudden sort of sitting in the pole position, I guess, in terms of taking over the family business.
But first, David would have to serve an apprenticeship.
Gee, that looked nice work, David.
It did.
What'd they run?
They ran the last in 12.1, the trip in 37.8.
Over the next 5 years, father and son would prove a winning team. 1989 was Lindsay Park's best year ever, with a prize money haul of almost 10 million. But Colin's health took a battering.
Colin hated losing. He used to eat his way out of trouble and had a bad heart condition. And he just sort of ate his way out of the race course. He bought an ice cream and then he had to have a pie, and then we went back to the hotel and he ordered a big fry up. And I remember thinking as a young girl, thinking, oh, you know, you shouldn't be doing this. It's just so bad for you.
After 2 heart bypasses, Colin, now in his mid-60s, stepped aside, and 27-year-old David took up the reins as head trainer.
David was handed a very, very good team of horses, and Colin and David had planned that. So, you know, in true Colin Hayes style, the future belongs to those who plan for it. Nothing was left to fate.
Colin's master plan immediately paid off. In 1990, David won Australia's second richest race, the Cox Plate.
No one was happier when David has success than Colin.
I'm just a proud parent now. I'm yesterday's man and he's doing the job.
And Colin now wanted to resolve the family succession. He called a family meeting to decide which son would inherit Lindsay Park. In this race, there could only be one winner.
It was decided that probably one should be a buyer and one should be a seller. And so Dad basically put a price on the table and said, who's the buyer and who's the seller? And of course, Peter didn't believe in the business as much as I did, so I was the buyer and he was the seller.
I knew that it was Colin's decision. It was Colin's business, Colin's decisions. So what he decided was what he decided.
David became the new lord of Lindsay Park, but he was now heavily in debt to his brother. To pay it off, he moved with his wife and 4 young children to the horse racing honeypot, Hong Kong.
For me, that was the place to go to earn money, and to prove myself as a horse trainer abroad.
The move paid off spectacularly. In prize money alone, David earned over 100 million Australian dollars.
It allowed us to really secure Lindsay Park for our family.
But in May 1999, whilst David and his family were still in Hong Kong, Colin finally succumbed to the flaw in his pedigree, his heart.
It was overwhelming. One of the things that I felt that on Dad's passing away that was very sad is that Dad couldn't see all the lovely things that were said and all the respect that he was given.
We had a long time to prepare for Colin's death because he was so unwell for so long that, you know, he was with us, thankfully, for a lot longer than we thought he was going to be.
Colin's sons now had to face the family history of heart failure. As the eldest, Peter had always been determined to avoid his father's fate.
He knew these things were hereditary, so he was very sort of careful about what he ate and how much exercise he got.
One thing that Pete always said is that most people retire when their bodies are finished. He wanted to retire in a healthy shape.
Peter's love was flying. He would pilot himself to race meetings around the country. Then in March 2001, a trial flight in a new plane went terribly wrong.
They got into a spin at an altitude that they didn't have enough room to pull out. They just ran out of space. So the people on the crash scene said that they looked like they'd regained control of the plane, started the engine and were starting to pull up when they hit the ground.
Less than 2 years after the loss of his father, the 51-year-old Peter was dead.
Of course, emotionally, losing a brother and a friend, which was just, you know, we were all in shock.
Peter's death was devastating. I mean, he was probably one of my closest, if not my closest friend. We had a wonderful relationship. You feel that terrible heartache. It's not just for yourself, it's for the children as well, losing their father.
Ironically, it was Peter's death that brought his son, Sam, back to Lindsay Park.
And the deers exploded and ran across the paddock.
Well, after Dad died, I got to spend a bit more time with David, and I think I flippantly said, look, if there's anything I can do to help you at home, just sing out, I'll be happy to help. And, you know, a couple of days later, David rang and said, oh, look, I think there is.
And he's probably covered more mares in the last 4 days than he would have in a month in his old home.
And coping well.
Yeah.
I offered him a job doing PR for Lindsay Park. One of the things I really enjoyed having Sam on the payroll was I had a little piece of Peter around me.
Sam now runs the Lindsay Park stud.
It would have been nice if Sam had been able to inherit some part of the business. It's probably made Sam work harder, be more ambitious to achieve something in his own right. But I think that Sam has such a business mind. It's more like he's Colin starting all over again from scratch.
Yeah, no, it's a very
fantastic, isn't it?
He's a good foal, I think. She's a lovely mare too, isn't she?
Yeah.
Colin was an empire builder, there's no doubt. And yeah, I just hope I've got 1/8 of that coming through my genes too. I'd like to build a little empire myself.
But Colin's eldest grandson will never inherit Lindsay Park. The family properties stretching from Adelaide to Melbourne are firmly in David's hands.
I think David's almost a replica of the things that Colin required, desired and achieved. He's done everything that his father prophesied he would.
But along with the assets, David knows he may also have inherited his father's weak heart.
I'm probably the same age and better shape than Dad was. But you never really know, do you?
Try and control his diet, not so successfully. He's got the genetics of his father. He's got a natural sweet tooth and try and keep that in check. I think if he was left to his own devices, he wouldn't be concentrating on his health, so... And he's got a high cholesterol like his father had.
And as the new master of Lindsay Park, David has to ensure there's an heir to succeed him.
Hopefully, I'll develop a trainer and I'll have one that looks like has the ability and the inclination to train at Lindsay Park. I think a young, hungry trainer is better than a tired old one.
The kids have been having conversations and I bags Lindsay. No, oh, well, I want Melbourne. And you think, oh, goodness me.
Which young Hayes wins this race has yet to be decided.
Certainly that Dad loved winning and I'm addicted to it, and I think my children might be the same.